Morning of the second day of the World Academic Society of Medical Qigong Conference 2019. Okay, so I'm going to break up my vlog about today at the conference into several sections because there was a lot that went on today. So I'm going to start just focusing on the morning, but before I do that, I will show you the things that came in our conference pack. So there was a t-shirt, which I haven't taken out of its bag yet. There was this great, so I think I've mentioned before, this is actually the 30th anniversary of the World Academic Society of Medical Qigong. So they have this commemorative book with information about different members of the association. And if I can find the right page in here, let me quickly see if I can have a look. Lots of, pictures of people practicing Qigong in different parts of the world. And look, I'm in the book. I think I'm in it somewhere else as well. That's obviously talking about Qigong, Master One visiting New Zealand and practicing Qigong there. So that was cool. Anyway, lots of things like that. And then, obviously a, ID. And this great book, which is about the presentations at the conference. It's actually got more than just the presentations at the conference. So within here, they have in Chinese, and then also in English, and then also Japanese as well, which I thought was really interesting because there's a really large Japanese contingent at the conference this year. So they translated into Japanese as well. So that made it really useful for being able to help to follow along with some of the presentations. As well as that, the everything was translated into both English and Japanese, so that was handy as well. And when someone presented in English, which several people did, it was translated into Chinese, so using little headsets. So as well as there being abstracts of papers and people's presentations in here, there are also a bunch of other abstracts of other research that there's some connection to the association as well. I'm not sure exactly what the story is with those extra ones. I wonder if it could be because this conference was actually supposed to happen in May, and then it had to be put off because of the 70th anniversary celebrations here. All the conferences in Beijing basically just got shut down by the government, and they had to put it off until October. So I wonder if some of those abstracts in there might have been from people who were planning to present, but then with the change of date weren't able to. But anyway, that's a good little reference in there. And then, of course, the program. Again, both in just in Chinese and English. It's not in Japanese as well. So I'm going to talk you through some of the presentations that were on the morning of the second day. Now, there was a great range of subject matter of the presentations and also a great range of quality. There were some which were solid scientific studies that people have been working on, and then there was a range of quality. So I'm not going to talk in detail about all of them, although it was interesting to see that, quite variability of what people were presenting. And some of it was just different subject matter. For example, some people were just doing case studies. Other people were, again, doing randomized trials and presenting about that. And then other people were just talking about things like what's going on with Qigong in their country and things like that. So a range of different presentations, and so I'll show you some footage of the different people speaking and talk a little bit about a few of the ones that I thought were particularly interesting for different reasons. So Master One, who we visited earlier in our trip and spent some time with, he gave a brief presentation talking about basically case studies of different people that he's treated at his clinic over the last several years. Then the next one was really solid look at some. It's really a proposed research project. I understand that the guy, his name is Chen Quen, has already been involved in some research, but he's looking at a new research project involving using Qigong to help with drug addiction and rehabilitating people. And he came up with some interesting points about using Qigong for this, some of which were that by using Qigong, and they have already measured this, that people doing Qigong felt that they had more self-confidence after that particular intervention than other interventions. So this was a positive thing, using Qigong compared to something else. Also, because of the habits that they can build through Qigong practice, it's something that they can maintain afterwards in their life, which of course is very important for rehabilitating from drug addiction. It's not like you just do one thing and then you're good, you're done. You need to be able to maintain good, healthy habits over a long period of time, and the Qigong is perfect for that once they've developed that habit, to help them to continue with that. He also mentioned that Qigong was easier for concentration than some other mindfulness practices. So because this has been studied, different mindfulness things being used in this area, and Qigong is easier for people to, who may have issues with their concentration anyway. It's easier for them to do Qigong and get the benefit of that than some other mindfulness type interventions. And related to that, he did talk about how embedded within the Qigong practice there are or can be psychological aspects. So it's not just about physical exercise and so on, but you're reinforcing psychology as well. So I thought that was a really good presentation. Something that was interesting about that is it sounds like, the details weren't fully clear, but it sounds like he's planning to do it at a Chinese drug rehabilitation center. He is based at a university in the United States, but it sounds like he's planning to do this, at a Chinese rehab center. And this is because in China, you basically, if you get caught taking drugs, you get arrested and essentially forced to go into rehab for 6 months. So quite literally a captive audience. And so he can get really large sample sizes. He can get a sample of 1,000 people and try them on his program and compare it to other interventions that they're doing as well, and talk about getting statistical significance. So that's interesting. It's some interesting ethical questions around that. But I imagine, look, they're forced into rehab anyway. It's just the choice of intervention. I imagine he has to get this past his ethics board at his university in the United States as well. So I'm sure it'll be well designed. But interesting little detail in that one. Again, some talking about different things, not necessarily research. Some just about what's happening in Qigong where they are, or through their experiences. Sunny, who is currently the president of the New Zealand Qigong and Traditional Chinese Medicine Association, talked about Qigong in New Zealand and how things have developed over the last some years. So the next one that I found really quite interesting in terms of the approach of what she spoke about was a lady from Japan. So her name was Hayashima Myocho, or Myocho, and she talked about, it was titled Tao in the Time of Anthropocene, and she did talk about the Anthropocene. It was a really interesting angle on things, but as she continued, basically, for me, the guts of her presentation, what she's talking about, was essentially rapid changes in human population in the more recent period, if we look at history on a macro scale, And then as a result of that, essentially us getting out of balance with nature. And so looking at damage to the environment and things like this, particularly occurring in the last, several decades. And then talking about how harmony with the Tao or harmony with nature is the way to resolve this, to come back into harmony, and this will correct some of the issues that we have. So an interesting take on things, to look at a Taoist view of human history, and then also of addressing some of the issues that we currently face. So an interesting presentation. There was another guy who it sounded like it was more case studies, but a program that he was very passionate about progressing, and this was to do with fasting connected to Qigong, and he made a clear distinction that it wasn't just fasting, but it was fasting with Qigong, and he referred to some of the old texts or old sayings talking about people living in the mountains on just wind and water. Now, by wind and water, it doesn't necessarily, if you understand the implications, so it could possibly mean they were breathing and drinking water. But wind and water is also often a reference to the energy of the earth and the flows of energy in the earth. So they were sustaining themselves with energy from the earth. And so he has this Qigong program involving fasting and using this to address health issues. And in particular, the case study that he mentioned was for working with people or women who have delayed or ceased their menstrual cycle and restarting it through fasting with this Qigong that he does. Spoke to him later on in the evening as well, a little about fasting, and that was interesting. I might mention that in one of the other vlogs when I get to that part of the day. I guess just an interesting note about that, because, and this applies to the next speaker as well, because the next speaker was talking about Tui Na combined with Qigong, and so Tui Na is Chinese massage. So he's talking about Tui Na and acupressure combined with Qigong, and some case studies around that. And you can define Qigong broadly, or you can define it narrowly. And I think both are useful in different contexts, because there are some things that are definitely more clearly, specifically, narrowly defined as Qigong. But because of the broad concepts of Qigong, working with energy, it's such a broad context. These naturally bleed into other areas, and really, in a sense, everything is Qigong, or everything is related to Qigong. And so you can quite validly look at things like fasting and diet as part of Qigong. It's not in that same narrowly defined way, but if you're looking more broadly, because of the connection of the energy into these different topics, of course there's a relationship. And similarly, things like massage and acupressure as part of Qigong, in a way. It's generally broadly accepted that Qigong therapy, it can be purely Qi emission, so non-touch, sending energy, that can be that type of treatment. But it's broadly accepted in a medical context that Qigong therapy will also involve, or could involve, some physical manipulation as well, massage, acupressure as well as energy emission, because they go together. The energy emission, stimulates the energy in the body in one way, but sometimes the physical manipulation stimulates energy in a different way, and can be very useful to help have the energy flow through. But tying it together is the concepts of Qigong, working with the energy, and so on. So that just some interesting things to think about, and interesting to see these broader aspects of things relating to Qigong being presented at this medical Qigong conference, not restricting things just to that narrow definition, but looking at things a bit more broadly. Let's see, what else did we have? Okay, so this one was really solid. So this one was carried out, it was, his name is Liu Xin. There were other researchers involved as well, and it was a cooperation between think it was a couple of Chinese universities and also a university in Australia. And it was effective Qigong on metabolic syndrome. So metabolic syndrome, essentially insulin resistance, pre-diabetes, diabetes, people who have trouble with their metabolism not being active in the way that it should to be fully healthy. And really solid. They had a randomized trial with two groups and crossovers and all that sort of thing. I'm going to be showing some of the slides that he showed here. And really good results in terms of statistically significance improvement in different markers for people who went through the trial. And super impressive, the level of compliance, the level of people who stuck with the trial, because that can often be an issue in these sorts of things, that you start with a certain number of participants, but by the end you've lost so many of them. But a huge number of them just carried through and got the benefits. So yeah, that was a really, really good, solid piece of research. Really interesting to hear and encouraging to see that sort of research being done. And it was also reported in a whole bunch of journals. Towards the end of his presentation, he showed all these different journals that it had been published in, different medical journals, and that was really cool. Next one, also really, really cool. So it was a lady from Italy. Her name is Marissa Vocca. I think I've said that right. And she was talking about research that she was doing in Italy and a number of different projects, which is really, really cool. And so she sort of touched on different projects she'd been involved with, and then spent more time on her most recent one, which was using Qigong in a hospital environment for people who are sick. And she talked about some of the factors around that and the study design to overcome some of the issues and some of the positive results. And it was interesting. Something she said, just very briefly, gave me the impression or understanding from what she said that they had done both quantitative and qualitative measurements in her study, but because of having limited time at the conference, she only presented on the qualitative aspects. So that's what I understood from what she said. So I don't know what the quantitative measurements they took were. It would have been interesting to hear that as well. But she focused on the qualitative measurements that they had and improvement, essentially focusing around emotions of these people who are sick before sessions and after sessions, and the huge improvement that they had after each session, which, yeah, very, very cool. So that about rounds it up. There were a few others who spoke about different things, but a really interesting, really informative session this morning. There's going to be more of that sort of thing tomorrow, people presenting different papers in the morning, so I'm really looking forward to that, to see some of those as well. So that's it for this one. I'm going to make another one, maybe two vlogs about other things during the day, because it was a really busy day. I hope you've enjoyed it. It gives you a little taste of what it's like to be at one of these conferences. Of course, I can't show you everything here or anything like that. I can just give you a little sense of what you might experience if maybe you come to one of these or something similar yourself in the future. Okay, I look forward to seeing you on the next one.